Hey guys, so we're going to look at this poem Still I Rise today. It's the poem that you read yesterday, that you saw the reading from Maya Angelou. And what we're going to work on is breaking the poem into pieces. That's going to help us do a couple of things. One, it makes the poem more manageable. This isn't a super long poem, but it's a little bit long. When we break it into pieces, then we can handle each piece on its own. It makes it a little bit less overwhelming. What we're also going to do, though, when we break it into pieces, is each one of those pieces that we break it into allows us to write a paragraph about each one of those pieces. So it kind of organizes our essay for us. So by the time we're done breaking this poem into pieces, it's going to end up with 3 body paragraphs. So we're going to work on writing an intro paragraph later in the week, and then we're going to write a body paragraph, and eventually we're going to end up with a whole essay based on this poem alone. Okay? So I want to remind you about analysis, right? If you forgot about analysis, you can go back. I'm going to post the link again in this folder today to the analysis work that we did on Harlem. So if you want to rewatch that video about how X does Y and all that stuff, I'm going to explain it again briefly, but it's a little more in-depth in that previous video. So if you remember, how does X do Y? X is the thing that the author does with language. So in poetry, we often, not always, but often talk about figurative language, and that's what we're going to focus on for this poem too. So we'll talk about similes, metaphors, personification, imagery. And then what does it produce? So that's the why. What do we get out of that, all of that figurative language? In this case, I think Maya Angelou is talking about, and some of you noticed this in the discussion post, she's talking about powerlessness and how you overcome it, right? And so she's talking about how she has overcome hardships in her life. So when I'm breaking a poem into chunks, what I do is I look for places where the author shifts either tone, the way that she sounds, or like a structural move that she makes. And if you'll notice, I'm going to point over here. When she uses the phrase, I'll rise, right? And I'll rise, still I'll rise, still I'll rise. I'm going to use those to help me break the poem into chunks. Okay, so the first chunk is going to end right here, right? So all of this part here, the lines, it's like lines 1 through 12 are going to be the first chunk. And then she starts asking some questions, right? Some more questions. These questions set up her idea of, again, but like air, I'll rise. So I'm going to make that the second chunk. So 1, 2, 3 stanzas. Remember, stanzas are just like, it's what we call a paragraph in a poem. This stanza is a little bit out of place to me. I don't mean to judge it. I'm just saying it's a little bit hard structurally, so I actually added it to that second chunk. Okay, and then this last stanza, I think, all fits really well together, so I'm going to make that the last chunk of the poem. So we have the first chunk right here, the second chunk right here, the next 4 stanzas, and then this last stanza, the kind of longer stanza. We're going to make that the final chunk of the poem. Okay, so what your assignment is today is, now that you've read the poem several times and you're thinking about how does X do Y, you're going to have a copy of this sheet in your folder. For each chunk of the poem, I want you to locate the figurative language, I label that in red, that expresses the ideas of power or overcoming hardship. Okay, so how does she gain power and how does she use that power to overcome hardship? So what you're going to do is find the figurative language. We've practiced this, so you know how to do that. And just locate it and type the figurative language in this box. And then you're going to explain how that helps the convey her ideas. Okay, so I want you to do at least 2 in each stanza. So this first one I did for you, so it's right from the beginning here. You may trod me in the very dirt, but like dust I'll rise. Okay, so in this case she's comparing herself to dust. If you put her down in the dirt, but then she is like the dust, and right, and when wind comes, it blows the dust up. She's going to rise. So even though you've made her dirty, even though you've put her down, she can still rise. Okay, so that's how she's explaining how she uses that moment of powerlessness to actually become stronger and rise up. Okay, so what I want you to do is find at least one more example in this stanza, and then as you move down, find at least 2 here and 2 here. Figurative language, just copy it in here, and then over here you're going to explain it. Okay, this assignment's a little bit more difficult. It's okay though, I know you can handle it. And tomorrow we're going to work on starting to actually write about this stuff instead of just organizing our ideas. But I want you to keep this. You're going to keep this sheet because it's going to help you later when we go to write the essay.